Gracious God, for the gift of this day, we give you thanks. We thank you for the gathering of community, the privilege of learning with other people, the gift of exploring and asking big questions about this beautiful world you've given us and the creations that we have made as humans. God, help us to be wise and discerning as we learn and ask questions together. We seek all of this in a desire to honor and grow more faithful to you. Amen. Alrighty, well, little business first. I had a PowerPoint, but it's not working. So there's supposed to be a cool screen, make it look like I really prepared because I did, but alas, no screen. So the topic of today is, I called it the gospel and smartphones or your phone. And I want to start with a little activity. Raise your hand if you have a pen. Okay, we've got enough pens, I'll get you some more pens. I'm going to pass out a piece of paper. On one side, I want you to take 1 minute per side. One side, ooh, thank you, Barry. One side says, what is your relationship with your smartphone or in social media? And the other side asks, how is it with your soul? Take 1 minute on each side. So we're just jotting down very quickly some thoughts on this. And I am not going to have you share these, but I am going to have you give them to me at the end because I am curious. One of the questions I'll be prompting you throughout this is, what is the relationship? So if you have a pencil or a pen or any kind of writing item, write a few things down. And I'll try to find some more pens too.
Yeah.
All right, take a minute on that first side, whatever side you want to start with. Yeah. That is a good question. How is it with your soul is a traditional question in spiritual practice in Christianity. And it's often, if you do spiritual direction or sometimes Christian counseling, that will be the opening question. How is it with your soul? You can use an image. You can say good, bad. How connected do you feel to God these days? How settled in God's spirit do you feel? All of that. It's supposed to be very broad, but a very good question. And whenever I'm asked it, it takes me a minute to figure that answer out. So take a minute, right on each side. All right, just a few more seconds. Okay, you could probably write about that for much longer than the time it gave me, but we're just doing a very quick start here. So throughout this, I want to ask, what is the relationship between our relationship with our phones and social media and how it is with our soul, our relationship with God? I want to start, so I'm going to talk about a growing, ballooning, exploding mountain of research about the impact of phones and smartphones and social media on our lives and our culture. And some of that's going to be negative. So let's start with the opposite. What is good about smartphones and social media? Shout it out. I'm going to write it up here, and I'm going to give you a warning. I'm a horrible speller. I will spell something wrong. Spell check ruined me, but before spell check, I never passed a spelling test. So, what's good? Yes. What else?
Ease and access to information.
Yes, access to information. I did all my research for this on the computer, not at the library. No chat GPT for me. I am too scared. What else?
Comes in handy in an emergency.
Yes, emergencies. Directions, needing to call an ambulance. What else?
Rob, for me, it's an incredible way to communicate.
Communication.
Groups that you can communicate to versus if you got the phone.
And
30
that's-
people. That's
Yes. What else?
Great way to get,
What's that?
great way to get directions.
Directions. Amen. But who? Well, I'll get there. I used to be a master at directions. I still don't know my way around. Now I don't know my way around. What else is good? Yeah.
okay, so what about recipes?
Recipes.
Instead of those big.
Yep. Who has a shelf of cookbooks they don't use much anymore?
Sharing photographs.
Yes.
Storing photographs.
Yes, storage. What else? What else is good about smartphones and social media?
Let me. Easy
You're right,
access to telephone numbers or addresses.
Contact information. It's the Rolodex, right? But a little more efficient. I'm going to add convenience. I was falling asleep last night and realized I need to transfer money to pay my taxes, and did that within 2 minutes and was back to bed, which is pretty crazy. Convenience. Let me spell this wrong.
Well, just pay all your bills, your
Yes.
tax.
Yeah.
Your banking is all mobile.
All the money stuff. If you've embraced all of it, there's a lot of convenience there, right? That's what you call it.
In parentheses, stuff like that.
It's an easy way to find it.
Yes. Does anyone use AirTags now? Josh recently lost his keys, and we now AirTag our keys, and now we'll never lose them again because it's one less thing to think about.
Life changing.
All right, let's do two more or one more. I see another hand. All right, well, after this, you might be less disappointed about that.
Gifts up there, electronic gifts.
GIFT or GIF?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Well, thank you. Ooh, yes, much louder. Thank you for humoring my list. We all know this is a short list and it could be much longer. I think probably the biggest ones, the words I would underline are connection, communication, and convenience, right? Those are three revolutions all at once. And here we are with varying levels of adapting to these major transformations in how we can communicate, how we can connect, and how we can do, almost anything in our lives. There's now an app for that, which was the marketing plan for the Apple Store way long ago. So there are some really great things about phones. Probably one of my favorite things is I've got a lot of extended family in faraway places. There's an app where you can easily send video messages to your family, and my daughter knows her extended family really, she knows them because she messages them all the time. And without that, she might not recognize Nana and Papa. So big blessings in all this. Okay, but what is not so great about smartphones and social media? I debated about how to structure this topic because there are two ways to approach it. One, I could just dive into here are the problems, or two, I could name for you a bunch of statistics about issues arising in our culture around a certain period of time. I'm going to do the first, but let me name this. Here's a little timeline of important dates. So the iPhone was released in 2009. The like button was created shortly after that, in 2009 or 2010. The share button came shortly after that, if you're on Facebook and Twitter. And then in 2013, Facebook acquired Instagram, and Facebook then changed its algorithms. Early on, Facebook didn't have a money-making apparatus, but it worked its algorithms to finally do advertising in the Facebook platform, which obviously exploded Facebook, and monetized the platform, and that was around 2013. 2014 is the year that 50% of Americans had a smartphone, which is the fastest adaptation of adoption of a new technology in the history of the world, our country. The TV took 50 years to reach that point. For the smartphone, it was 5. So 2014 is the year 50% of Americans had adopted the smartphone. And I'm going to bring this up throughout my teaching, but if you look at data sets for all sorts of things, all sorts of problems start around 2013 and 2014, and I'll get to that. So I'm going to dive in, having named that, I'm going to dive into some of the things, the main things that I think are challenges to us as Christians in our smartphone use. I am someone who has been trying to get rid of my smartphone for about a year. I told our staff I was going to do it a year ago. Haven't done it. Probably not ever going to do it. I use it all the time. I love it. I'm on social media. And the more time goes, the more research I've started doing, the more I think Christians, and all people, but Christians, need to be asking some more in-depth questions about what is the ethical way to be using this powerful technology. The smartphone is more powerful than the computer that took people to the moon in the 60s. So what is the ethical use of this tool? I should probably have mine out, but research shows that if there's a phone out in the room, people's focus goes down. So I won't do it. Here are the 4 things, the 4 major areas I would start with. Phones, I think in our society at large, I'm going to point to phone use, social media use, screen use as a major, though probably not the only source of these issues in our culture, but a major source. 1, we are losing our social fitness. We are lonely, and it is killing us. I will get into that. 2, ethical malformation. Our social media algorithms incentivize bad behavior and form us in ways that make us less ethical. 3, so those are the 2 big ones. Those are the heavy hitters. Then smaller is, I think often we are settling for lesser goods when we use our phones. And I will get into that as well. And then distortion of time. We feel busier, but we are not busier than we used to be. So those are the 4 areas. Let me start with this question as I get into social fitness. What is the number 1 thing that makes for a happy life? A group of researchers at Harvard have been studying a group of people for an 85-year study has been seeking the answer to this question, and they have an answer to it.
Make your wife happy.
Happy life, that's one I'm thinking, smiling. Relationships, yes. This 85-year study out of Harvard is recently released a book where they basically assert that with data, they can say the number 1 thing to make a happy life is social relationships. And not only that, but the strength of our social relationships, they call it social fitness, which is an interesting term that's new to me. Call it social fitness. The greater your social fitness, the longer you live, which is probably part of why Christians do live a little longer in the actuarial tables. So, our society, though, is getting out of shape, social fitness-wise. Let me define social fitness a little more. Okay, so they create 7 categories. I'm gonna need to open my computer. Sorry, this is for the PowerPoint, would have been helpful. The first 3 aspects of social fitness, I'm gonna revisit these at the end of my talk, but first, safety and security. Who would you call if you woke up in the middle of the night because something has happened or you're just feeling afraid? Question 1. Question 2, learning and growth. Who encourages you to try new things? 3, emotional closeness and confiding. Who knows everything or most things about you? Who would you call when you're feeling low? I hope in your mind you're thinking about 1, the answer of who I would call, or do I call someone when this happens? I have another half of this list that I can access here now. Okay. Identity, affirmation, and experience. Is there someone in your life who has shared many experiences with you and strengthens your sense of who you are? 2, 3, 4, 5. Romantic intimacy. Do you feel satisfied with the amount of romantic intimacy in your life? Help, both informational and practical. Who do you turn to if you need expertise with something practical, like a car problem, planting a tree, your Wi-Fi connection? And then last, fun and relaxation. Who makes you laugh? Who do you call to go on to a movie with, or on a road trip with, or to do something fun with? So the Harvard researchers break social fitness down into these 7 categories. Now, I'm going to bring those back near the end of my talk, but just keep those in the back of your mind as we go. So here's some of the data on our social fitness as a society. First, let me talk about teenagers, because I think teenagers are the canary in the coal mine with this situation. If you've heard about the teen mental health crisis, it is bad out there. It is bad. So I could give you much more data. I'm going to give you a little data. 30% of American teen girls considered attempting suicide in 2021. That is up 19% from 2011. And that's according to the CDC. Persistent feelings of sadness have increased in both boys and girls. The more hours a day a teen spends on social media, the more likely he or she is to be depressed. And there's more data arriving that is showing that it is not just that social media use is correlated, it's causational. I may get to this on a future slide or future, I see the slideshow. Facebook did its own research on the impact of Instagram on teenagers. Facebook itself found that the use of Instagram was exacerbating, creating horrible body image issues for teen girls. The teen mental health crisis can be studied in lots of ways. One might say, oh, well, they're more open about talking about mental health issues, which is true. And if you control for self-disclosure through things like self-harm, hospital admission, and suicide attempts, those are not self-disclosures, those are things that happen. Hospital keeps track of those numbers, whether the person wanted the hospital to know or not. Those numbers are skyrocketing, especially for teen girls. Boys as well, but it is extra bad for teen girls. So our teens are spending more and more time on social media, and these numbers, if you look at the graphs, they all start to shoot up around 2013, which is fascinating. Social fitness, we are spending more time alone. This is not just teenagers now. So the American Time Usage Survey was created in 2003, and from 2003 to 2013, Americans spent about the same amount of time with friends every week, about 7 hours a week with friends, and about 15 hours a week if you do friends, family, close coworkers, etc., social time. In 2021, Americans now spend less than 3 hours a week with friends. That's down over 50%. And our time alone has increased for teens by 10 hours a week. And the time use survey does not count time at school or time sleeping. So we're just talking about like 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. and weekends. And teens are spending 10 hours a week less with their friends than they did 10 years before. And the quick change in and this is across demographics. A lot of this data is across demographics. So it's doesn't matter if you're urban or rural, rich or poor, white or black. And I'll get to some other, there's one chart that I'm really sad I won't be able to show you, and it's a sign that shows the global statistics of this. So we are spending more and more time alone, and teens are spending 60% less time with friends than they used to be. So the question is, what are we doing? Jean Twenge, who is the author of iGen, which came out in 2017, so it's kind of an early book on what we now often call Gen Z. She also just wrote a book called Generations, which I highly recommend. It's fascinating. She goes through all of us, and I've learned a lot of things about y'all's generations and my generation and Gen Z through this book. And she is, I would call it data hound. She just has, everything comes back to the numbers because she's not trying to speculate. And she points out that these trends are happening with all of us. So we're spending more time alone, and especially teens, but other generations too are struggling with mental health more. So I have, this is the slide, I'm really sad I can't show you. There is evidence globally that the younger a kid gets a smartphone, not a communication device, because dumb phones were just communication devices, we're talking smartphones. The younger a kid gets a smartphone, the worse their mental health outcomes as adults. And it looks like this. And it is particularly severe for girls, but also for boys. And that is a global statistic. You can control for countries, and all the countries that we have data for are showing the same trends starting around 2013, 2014. It's fascinating. So our social fitness has declined. I've already mentioned that what makes a happy life is relationships. I'm preaching to the choir because you're actually showing up here at church in the summer, having relationships with other people, and yet all of us are spending probably more time alone than we once did. Part of that can be streaming. We used to go to the movies to watch a movie with friends. Now we can just stream it on Netflix. Or we used to wait every week for Seinfeld or Friends to come out so we could watch it with our friends. And now we binge the whole season all by ourselves. Or we can be on our phones more. We can be doing all sorts of things. But particularly the screens, social media, etc., is part of why we're spending more time alone. So we have a lone crisis. And Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, has basically said we have an epidemic of loneliness, and he has made it one of his top priorities. If you Google some of his stuff, there's been lots of articles about this. We're not just spending more time alone, we are now more lonely. So our social fitness is declining. Now, ethical formation, that's the second part. I'm going to do a little theology here. Thomas Aquinas, 11th century Catholic theologian, argued that our ability to do the right thing comes from habits over time. We call this virtue ethics. These habits are called virtues, and the more we practice them, the more they become who we are. So Aquinas might say, you become what you do. The craftsman, the woodworker, who again and again practices sanding down that piece of wood till it's just right, that becomes second nature to them. And eventually they could probably do it with their eyes closed, right? That's virtue ethics. Over time, we practice saying and doing the right thing, it becomes who we are, second nature. Augustine, he argued in the 4th century, I always get the centuries and things, that to do the right thing comes from desire. We do what we want, so then cultivating the right desires is essential. He would say you become what you love. So we at the church are trying to cultivate a love for God because we want to become God's followers. Either way, both of these arguments have a lot of merit, and I think deserve our serious attention. You become what you do, or you become what you love. Either way, we are being shaped in our world. We're being shaped by the things we do, by the things we love, and what causes us to do and love things. So, the fruit of the Spirit, this is what we're supposed to be doing as Christians, right? Is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Paul says, against these things there is no law. So my question is, how do the algorithms of our social media, where we're having a lot of social interaction, stack up? How are they forming us? What are they making us desire? What are they making us do? And this is where I would go to the Facebook files articles out of the Wall Street Journal. Has anyone had a chance to read some of those? Highly recommend the Facebook files. They are fascinating. A woman who was on, I believe, the ethics team, it's been a while since I read them, on the ethics team of Facebook, paid to try to explore the ethical issues of this radically new technology. Her mother is an Episcopal priest, and part of why she felt the call to share some documents from the company was because she felt like it was the ethical thing to do. So we have these Facebook files. I have a handout at the end with the titles of a bunch of their articles, because the titles alone are fascinating. From that in-depth study, or from that whistleblowing account articles, it is clear that Facebook, one of the summary points is Facebook tried to make its platform a healthier place in 2018. I don't know if you remember, Mark Zuckerberg kind of did this whole, we're going to change the platform, we're going to make it healthier. But internal memos showed how big the 2018 change actually rewarded outrage, and that Mark Zuckerberg resisted proposed changes to fix the outrage. So the Facebook algorithm and the other social media platforms, it's just we have actual internal memos from Facebook about this. It profits on anger. That is the primary vehicle for resharing. Yes, a good picture of a great baby is going to be reshared, absolutely. And that is when I think Facebook is at its best. I don't know about you, when I log on to my Facebook, I scroll down, I get like those 5 good pictures of like, here's the things that have happened in my friends' lives. If I go any further, it starts to derail. And Facebook knows that. Facebook actually relies on that for its business model. Misinformation also is reshared very quickly. And I have not even tried to engage the topic of AI yet, because honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm just trying to wrap my mind, excuse me, I'm going fast. Trying to wrap my mind around phones. I can't imagine AI, but AI is going to make all of this all the harder, because it will be even harder for us to tell what is true and what is false on Facebook, because AI can create all sorts of headlines. So Facebook also, in these the Facebook files, just a couple of facts about it because it really upsets me. It basically shrugs its shoulders at illegal gun sales and human trafficking on the platform. And one of the articles in the Facebook files is about how Facebook knows that they have been used, particularly in India, although other countries as well, to sow the seeds of religious hatred. So Frances Haugen talks about, she's the whistleblower for all this. She said, we would watch as the ethics team when our platform was being used to dehumanize people, and we knew when it was gonna proceed killing, and it would. And they knew. And there wasn't much that was done about all of that. So there's a lot of ethical complication in these great new technologies, but it has only been 10, 15 years. It's only been 10 years since they've been truly monetized. That is really fast, and much more conversation needs to be happening about how do we do this Facebook already, or Instagram, Facebook already knows it's toxic to teen girls. Their mental health data shows that, but also if you just ask them, they know. They are aware. And there is a rise through Instagram primarily, but lots of other platforms, in parasocial relationships. Who has heard the word parasocial before? Yes. Parasocial relationships. The first famous parasocial relationship is Lucille Ball. She was in our living rooms, or y'all's living rooms, and you felt like you knew her. Right? You felt like you knew her. And she was the first celebrity to really get that, like, people feel like they know me, but we don't know each other. This is not a real relationship, not a socially fit relationship. I would argue that that's what Instagram really lives on. And Instagram's my favorite platform. I had to deactivate because I use it. I loved it so much. But I will be honest, in COVID, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to be honest with you. I said to Josh, what did I say? I said, Josh, can I tell you about my friends on Instagram? So I've got this girl who's renovating her house, and this girl who's about to have a baby, and this girl who's a doctor, and like there's a girl who's an epidemiologist, and they're all around my age, and they feel like my friends, and I'd like to check on them. That is the parasocial relationship for you. I will never meet these people, and even if I did, it would be brief. It's a real relationship, but I know so much about them, and I even now I've deactivated, but I still think about these women who I checked on social media. That's embarrassing, but I know I'm not the only one. It is real. Parasocial relationships. And then TikTok. That, I haven't gotten on TikTok, but basically Reels on Facebook or Instagram is the same thing. And it's forming us to have shorter attention spans, and I would call it ephemera of content. Ephemera is stuff that's here and gone, here right now and gone tomorrow, like a wisp in the wind. And we engage on that platform in particular. Reels or TikTok is set up that you see something and it's gone in a second. And so everything you encounter becomes quickly disposable, and it makes it actually really hard to remember things that you've seen sometimes. Sometimes you remember them, sometimes you don't. And I have gone down the tunnel, the rabbit hole of Reels before too. The biggest reason why I had to deactivate my Instagram is I would lose like 30 minutes to an hour without realizing it, watching videos of cakes being decorated, cookies being iced, and carpets being cleaned, and there are people smiling and laughing because they know this is real. So the disposability of these experiences are just becoming normalized. So So, question, the fruit of the spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. How are these algorithms forming us in those ways? And I would argue it's making us less patient because our attention spans are shorter. It's making us more angry because Facebook needs us to get angry to make more money. It's making us more polarized. The extremes are the ones who are the loudest on social media. So it's depending on, I've seen two sets of data. One is like 7% of our culture are at the far extremes, and I saw one that said 15% of our culture are at the far extremes. Either way, those people are the ones whose content will get shared most widely on social media and probably TV news, because it brings so much more passion and engagement drives the business model. So we think the far ends are everyone. It's really not. The silent majority is the people in the middle who are like, yes and no, this is complicated. But boy, don't try to say it's complicated on Twitter, because you know you'll get just ranked for that. So I would argue that these algorithms are shaping us. They're making us desire our desires more volatile and impatient and angry, not the fruit of the spirit. And they're making our desires and our behaviors more impatient, less engaged. And I'll get a little more into that in a minute. So those are my two big things. One, we have to be thoughtful about our social fitness. And I'll circle back to that at the end. And then two is, how are these things forming us? And it's going to be most acute for young people who are currently being formed. They are the most molten, but we are all still molten in some way. And if I experienced really going deep into this in the pandemic, when isolation was just what was happening. And I imagine most of you could probably identify at least one way where you experienced that or saw it happening to other people. So those are my two big things. Here's the two smaller things. One, part of, I think, why we are suffering from more loneliness, more anger in our society, and more isolation is that we are settling for lesser goods. I only recently started thinking about this, and it's been actually very powerful for me. Every time I am doing something with my phone, I ask myself, is there a real life way to do this that might be better, that might make me feel more connected with someone? So I was sending a picture to a friend of the vacation I was on with my in-laws. And I thought, actually, maybe I'll wait instead of texting them really quickly this picture. And they're going to look at it and say, cool, awesome. And then it'll be over. Sitting down with them and telling them about it, telling them about the trip is so much more rich than just posting about the trip. Or being in a waiting room. How often do we sit in a waiting room, we pull out our phones, or just scrolling? What about sitting down and looking around the room, or letting your brain go blank? Our brains are not getting enough time anymore to just be empty and wander our thoughts. That's the source of creativity, and that is on the decline. So what about that? Or there's been a study that shows they took people who were riding the train in a city, and they paid certain people to strike up conversations with strangers. And all of the people who were paid to strike up conversations they said they enjoyed their train ride so much more because they talked to a stranger. I don't know about y'all, maybe the way I feel like I grew up as a millennial was I do not talk to strangers, and I shouldn't bother them, and don't do it. But actually that really increases our social connection. What about that, instead of just burying my face in my phone? What about optimizing every minute that we have? Who has done phone work at a stoplight? I can't be the only one. Come on, yes. I have done lots of phone work at stoplights in my life. I am optimizing, sure, I'm getting things done, but am I being really attentive? I'm not driving, I'm at a stoplight, but at the same time, my brain is frantic because I'm in between stoplights and thinking, okay, what else do I need to get done? How quickly could I do this on my phone in between the next thing? That is making me frantic and frenetic. And
You know that's against the law. I just read that this week.
well, that's why I'm glad it's against the law. It should be against the law. It's so tempting. Good. It should be. I should get caught for doing that. It's just the pull of I could optimize every minute, right? Or I could just sit here and be bored at the stoplight and listen to my daughter babble in the backseat. That's also an option that might be richer for life. And so there's lots of ways that I think we've started to just turn to our phones when maybe we could turn to a person. I noticed this on my family vacation a couple weeks ago. There would be times we've got like 18 people in a house together. You get socialed out. You need a little chill out time. So there'd be times where a bunch of us would be in the living room on our phones, which is fine. But if we didn't have the phones, maybe we would actually go outside and look at the lake that's right in front of us, right? But instead, I don't know what we're scrolling doing, getting putting lessons on our phones. That's an option for sure. But are we missing something that's better? It's not that it's bad, it's just we're settling for a lesser good. And I would argue parasocial relationships are a lesser good. They are relationships, sure. I learned a lot from those gals on social media about home renovating and medicine when I was on my phone so much. But there is a richer good out there, which is actually the physical people around us. Okay, finally, time distortion. Let me read a scripture from Romans 5. Not only that, but one last. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. The best things in life are typically hard. I think that's what Paul was getting at, if I were to summarize it real briefly. Best things in life take some more effort. And the hard thing is that we now have a supercomputer in our pockets all the time that's offering us hyper convenience. Sometimes that's absolutely amazing. I needed to transfer money at 1 a.m. last night, and I did. But sometimes that convenience is we're actually sacrificing something, whether it's reaching out to another person or engaging more deeply in the people around us, or just have an empty space in our brains. I do not think you can grow spiritually if you are always frantic. And I have found that phone use, if I'm not being very thoughtful, it makes me more frantic because I'm always trying to do something. It is really hard to grow spiritually if we are always rushing to the next thing or optimizing or whatnot. So, last one is time distortion. Are we busier? Often, I'm not gonna ask for raise your hands. I have said before, everyone is just busier now than they used to be. But then I read these studies from Jean Twenge, who is that she does the Generations book, she's the data hound. And she points out for Gen Z, so that's the specific data set, but it's true for other generations as well, that Gen Z and actually millennials in high school spent less time on sports, on volunteering, and on homework than Gen X did. But they feel busier. Why? Probably because there's this thing in the pocket that you take time. I mean, I told you I quickly lost a half hour to an hour at a time on my phone on Reels. You could do that if you're a teenager, right? Your brain is still developing, that self-control is not there, especially if no one's helping you. I'll get to some of that. You could quickly lose a lot of time, and then you're rushed on your homework, you feel busy, but are you? Actually, probably not. And I think that is true for all the generations. I think maybe we all feel a little busier If you're a smartphone user, Vic, you're the exception. But if you're a smartphone user, you may also find this in your life. I have found it in mine. Then there's the pace of consumption. I kind of got onto this with talking about TikTok, ephemera of content. Things are coming, they're going. I love podcasts a lot. I can slam 5 podcasts in a day while I'm easy. Yes, I've got a podcast lover here. We should compare what podcast you love. But I painted Joanna's nursery last week, listened to a bunch of podcasts on this topic, got some good information. Did I retain a lot? Probably, because I finished one thing, went on to the next thing. It's hard to let anything sink in if you're constantly rushing to the next thing. In the 8:30 service, we've just in the last month started to add a 1-2 minute reflection time after the sermon, just to give people a chance to let it sink in, because everything in our lives is one to the next to the next. How are we supposed to have anything sink in if we're constantly on to the next? Screens are also just addictive via the dopamine mechanism in our brain. We know this. I found this on the Mayo Clinic website. Too much screen time has been linked to obesity, poor sleep or insomnia, behavioral problems, including impulsive actions, loss of social skills, violence, less time for play, eye strain, neck and back problems, anxiety, depression, and difficulties with work or school. It can be addictive, and I'm going to conclude with that in a minute. And then consider the time lost. I think this is a major thing we don't talk about enough. And I've kind of touched on it. When I'm using my phone to read an article, which is nice, there are also paper books that I have in my office that I have not read, that I probably could. But I'm reading something on my phone. What am I not doing? What is the time lost? I think that's the big question with that teens statistic, that they are not doing more homework, volunteering, or sports. What are they? They're probably on their phones where they're losing time volunteering at gym sports. They're losing time with friends. What are we losing time with when we are getting sucked into the rabbit hole of our phone, whatever it is? I have started asking myself that, and I think that might be the greatest challenges that comes from this new technology in our lives. It's just, what are we not doing now? Because we're doing this other thing that's convenient and in our face and easy. And I'm going to read a quote from the Old Testament from 1 Kings. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. The Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. And that's when God speaks to Moses. God often does speak in the quiet, and in the silence, and in the stillness. And these powerful devices are not going to incentivize those things. Even Headspace, meditation app, or whatever devotional app, Breathe, yep, or I've got Pray As You Go. Even that is wonderful, but it is not the same thing as sitting still and listening to God. It just isn't. Or reading the old-fashioned Bible. Even the screen is not the same thing as reading on paper. So my big question to all of us is, how might I've pinpointed some things. I have noted some things. But everyone has to answer this for themselves. How might our phone use be impacting our soul and our social relationships? I think everyone has to answer that for themselves. For me, I've been on this probably the last year. I've been really learning that there's a lot of ways I have unknowingly given away ground from the stillness of my spirit, my trust in God, my time with God, my time with people, friends, and community, without even realizing it. So for me, I have been feeling called to be more thoughtful. And I invite y'all to have conversations with your friends and family about how might we be more thoughtful about the use of this. Now here's a great thing. Let me, got 5 minutes. what am I gonna cut? Okay. I'm not gonna revisit this totally, but those 7 aspects of social fitness, safety, security, learning and growth, emotional closeness, etc. If you go through those, I would say that our phones, social media, streaming, have all probably given us a phone answer to those questions and not a people answer to those questions. What do I do when I'm scared in the middle of the night? I don't call a friend. I start Googling WebMD to figure out if why I'm feeling weird is something, right? If something breaks in my house, I don't call someone who I know is handy. I just Google it and get an answer on YouTube. And sometimes that's great, right? Like that is very convenient and I need to know how to do something quickly. But think about the time lost of the relationship and the person who might have loved to help you. And maybe this is not a problem for y'all, but I can say in my life I've noticed it. Emotional closeness and confiding. There's a lot more really intimate self-disclosure on social media than there used to be. And I wonder if there's less intimate self-disclosure between actual just friends, face to face. And you can talk more about that. But I would argue each of those social fitness things, we have to be really thoughtful. Are we choosing the phone option or are we choosing the people option? Because actually the people option is going to make us happier. It is pretty much what life is about. Love God, love your neighbor, be loved by them. Okay, so I've made a lot of problems. I told Josh, I told the staff, it's gonna be a big bummer of a Sunday school lesson. But that's not all. There are some hopeful things. So the first is just reflecting on ourselves, naming and understanding what's going on. Keep learning with me. This is new. There's a lot of research going on out there now. Books are forthcoming from authors that I've read little articles about them talking about this. So hopefully this will be more and more of a national conversation. The second big thing I think we can do with phones, and this applies especially, I would say, to teenagers and kids, but for all of us, is to get the metaphor right. Phones are not washing machines. They're not just time-saving devices that we can use and then carry on with our lives. I think the 2 images that are most helpful are, they are like a car that you need to be trained to use, and they are like alcohol. Yes, many people can consume alcohol healthfully within moderation and find a way and carry on with their lives, and it is not hindering their faithfulness. That is not true for everyone. And that is also, I think, the case with social media. It is addictive, with social media and screen use. It is addictive. Our brains love screens. I've seen it with my own daughter. When the first time she watched a screen, she didn't really care. And now I can put anything on and she'll trance out. So now it's my job to be careful about not overusing that. They are addictive. And so how are we as a society creating safeguards against these things, around these things? There's a big program called Wait Till 8, which is advocating that we wait till 8th grade to get kids a phone. And the hope is that groups of people will do this. And when I say phone, I mean smartphone. Groups of friends will do this so that their kid is the only one. Because that's a huge fear. Every parent I know is like, I don't want my kid to hate me because I'm the only parent not giving them a smartphone. And developmentally, I wish I could have shown you that graph of age of phone and mental health outcomes, because it is staggering. The longer you wait, the better your kids' mental health outcomes are as an adult. It just global data. So that's part of, we have an age limit on alcohol. We do not have an age limit on social media. Technically, the platforms ask you to say you're 13, but we all know that there's no verification of that, and children are on the platform all the time. So I think getting the metaphor right is good. There's a benefit to these programs, these platforms, these technologies, but I think we've just treated it as new is good, blanket statement, embrace it wholeheartedly, go. And we're finding, most acutely with the teen mental health crisis, that maybe it's not so simple. And then So I mentioned Wait Till Late campaign. There's Screen Sanity, and they offer this really great, they call it starting suggestions. S, start with yourself. I'm talking about that. T, this is for kids, have tables and bedtimes. When can kids expect to have access to a screen and when can they not? And enforcing the bedtime, because Jennifer Hudson, a doctor, pediatrician in our area, saw a ton of kids, especially in COVID, but even still coming in with huge mental health issues. She said, are you sleeping? Well, I'm on my phone from like 10 to 2 a.m. Well, boom. She would like, let's just take the phone out of your room at night, start there, and we'll see. And she said their mental health would improve within 2 weeks. Accountability. Kids have access to everything out there. You gotta put some safeguards in there. The Screen Sanity has a lot of concrete suggestions for how to do that. And then my favorite is our ride, practice, drive. When we give kids, when they get their driver's license, we don't just give them the keys and say bye. They have a permit. First, they watch you drive their whole life, and they're gonna emulate how you drive, right? Speed, because my mom said, I know that. So they're watching, they're writing, and then they get a permit and they practice under supervision. And then when they're to the whatever age, then they get to go. And so the Screen Sanity program is trying to encourage this thoughtfulness. I just don't know if we've been thoughtful as a society about this radical technology that has just changed everything. And then finally, time well spent. What is time well spent for you? And how can we be more thoughtful about that for our kids, for ourselves? Our social fabric is so important in our society, and you've gotta keep weaving it. And folks who are in a generation older than me, you have experienced that more than I have, because I am 50% a technological native and Gen Z 100%. So you guys know what it is to weave social relationships together even better than I do. I feel like I've been in school, leading in the church, learning about this. So, but that's a skill and that's a practice, and I think every generation has kind of pulled away from it. So we do need to get to that and keep weaving the social fabric of our society together. So I have, if you're interested, a little kid, we're excited of the people I got information from, authors, hopeful organizations, and then articles and series to read, podcast. And I encourage you to take one and keep thinking about it and talk to me about this afterwards. I wish I saved time for questions, but I over-prepared because I was excited to talk about this. So I'm gonna end with prayer, and I'm gonna encourage all of you to come on over. Lewis Hall right over there. Service starts in just 10 minutes, and the TWAM team, Josh has several kids who just were really excited to share about their experience, which is, this church invests so much into these young people, and Josh takes their phones away, so they actually get to experience a week of just social relationships. They are getting cleverer and cleverer. They bring burners and they give Josh the burner. And he knows. But it's still better than nothing. So come on over and hear what's going on or what's happening there. Let me pray. God, for this congregation and community, we give you thanks. We thank you for just the gift of being able to ask questions and be curious together, to explore how this wonderful technology that has been a gift to all of us in many ways, how it also needs our thoughtfulness. We ask for your wisdom as we continue to learn and discern and grow as community in the midst of these real big issues that are going on with our young people, but with all of us as well, in spirit, mind, and soul. God, we pray that you'll be with the TWAM team as they lead us in worship in the next hour. We pray this in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. All right, I'm going to put these over there.